Hey guys, my name is Mark and welcome back to Creative Coding. So in this video series, we're going to be learning all about Linux through and through. For this series, I'm very happy to announce that two of my very good friends, Rohit and Max, are going to be making some of the video tutorials, so that's going to be really fun to do. So be ready to welcome the next generation of creative coding. So without further ado, let's get into today's video, which is going to be all about what is Linux exactly and the pros and cons of using Linux. Let's get straight into it.
So hey everyone, my name is Rohit, also known as Rocket in the Discord server, which you should totally join, by the way. I'm going to be one of the main instructors on this course for creative coding, along with a friend named Max, which you will see in later videos. So in this series, we are just going to be covering the basics of Linux, maybe some tips on how to install it, of course what it is, as well as interesting uses and interesting software, like text editors, terminals, things like that. So in this video specifically, we will be covering what Linux is, as well as some pros and cons of installing and using it in daily life. And yeah, let's get started. So what is Linux exactly? Well, it's just an operating system like Mac OS or Linux, or even Android and iOS. But Linux is actually the name of one part of the operating system called the kernel. The rest of the operating system is called GNU, G-N-U. So the actual term for the entire operating system is GNU/Linux. Of course, we're not going to go into full detail, but if you want to learn a bit more about the subject or what a kernel is, we'll link some videos in the description so you can take a look at those. But now we'll look at some pros and cons of installing it to see if you want to use it. So let's look at the first pro of using Linux, which is that it's open source software. You may have heard this term before. It means that anyone can look and submit changes to the code. Now this might seem like a bad idea at first because hackers can just look at the code, see what's wrong with it, and use that. But for every one hacker, there could be up to thousands of people actually looking to improve the code. So now there are thousands of people looking for bugs, glitches, security vulnerabilities, any exploits that could be used, and patching them up every single time. For the Linux kernel, for example, every time an exploit is found, it's patched in the next day or even week. So in the next release, everyone can update and there won't be a problem anymore. Another point similar to the previous one is that Linux is free as in freedom. It is also free as in cost, but this is a separate thing entirely. This means that Linux is licensed under the GPL license, or GNU Public License. So the goal of the GNU Software Foundation, or Free Software Foundation, is to make sure that you control the program, as opposed to the program controlling you. Now there are some specifics in the licenses which you don't need to know, and even I don't need to know, but essentially this gives you the freedom to do what you want with your software. It gives you just basic rights with it. Now, Windows and Mac OS are not under this license. They are proprietary software. So this means that they can essentially take away your rights. You'll see long license agreements in the beginning, and you have to agree to it. They can put certain conditions on the software that just wouldn't be allowed on free software. Linux is also very safe. Due to the open source nature of the operating system, bugs, exploits, and vulnerabilities usually get squashed very quickly. This means that me, as well as many other Linux users, don't use antivirus. Another wonderful thing about Linux is the customizability. You can change almost any aspect of it. To really explain this in depth, you'd need to understand what things like desktop environments and window managers are, which will all be covered in the next video. But for now, you can just look at all the possibilities, so enjoy. Linux is also a great choice when it comes to an older or less powerful device, due to the fact that the operating system is just very lightweight. Windows and macOS might actually slow down your device, especially if it's old, because they're not made for slow hardware. And you just need to keep updating them. But with Linux, things will just run very smoothly. I actually have a decade-old MacBook sitting around in my room that has Linux on it, and it just works amazingly. So if you have an old laptop or device that you want to keep using, install Linux and see what happens. All the above points culminate into making a very nice developer experience. Security, first of all, is just important to anyone, especially for developers when downloading things like text editors, dependencies, compilers, etc. Second is customizability, because you can make your desktop and your setup work exactly the way you want. That means no compromises whenever you're coding. You can create a setup which allows you to code efficiently as well as quickly. The next great thing is package management, and package managers more specifically. So Linux uses these package managers, and we'll explain specifically what they are in the future. Just now, know that you can install software with just a single command. Now, the next thing is DevTools, and more specifically the terminal. When you use the terminal, it allows you to do many things and use a lot of cool software. So that behind me is a terminal. We're using a specific application on it. But when using it, it gives you access to compilers like GCC, as well as certain systems like Make, as well as many other great dev tools, which make your developer experience really nice, simple, and easy. Now let's start with some of the cons of Linux, with the main two being certain hardware compatibility issues and software compatibility issues. So on the hardware side, like tons of devices work. Really, you can install Linux on a variety of laptops, just devices in general, and it will work very well, especially because it's so lightweight. But there can be problems with certain drivers for things like GPUs, Wi-Fi cards, or Bluetooth adapters. Though, if you make the correct choices and know where to look, you'll find the solutions really quickly, and we're obviously going to help you with that. Next, on the software side, the main two are gaming and certain app compatibility. So on the gaming side, a lot of the top Steam games work, and gaming on Linux is improving a ton. So currently, Valve, the company behind Steam, is actually working towards better gaming on Linux. But if you play certain multiplayer games, especially those with heavy anti-cheat, things like Valorant or CSGO, they will just not work on Linux. Another problem with software compatibility is, of course, apps. Now, certain manufacturers just don't want to port their apps to Linux. The main company who does this is Adobe. None of the Adobe Creative Cloud, or just Adobe apps in general, they won't work on Linux. So if your livelihood depends on something like Photoshop, Premiere Pro, Lightroom, or any of the other Adobe Creative Cloud apps, you sadly won't be able to. Though there are many great alternatives to things like Photoshop and Premiere Pro. The thing I use is GIMP. This is basically Photoshop, but it's free and open source software. There are many free and open source editors out there, and of course will help you making correct choices when looking into these things. But if you really do need some of these apps, games, or you just want to make sure Linux is right for you, we're going to suggest dual booting, which is what I do. It essentially means you can use both Windows and Linux on the same computer. And all you need to do to switch between them is restart your computer. So if you just want to start out without losing access to Windows, to your favorite games or favorite apps, then dual boot Linux and Windows. We're going to give you some tips as well as good resources on how to do it in the next video or the one after that. So of course, watch out for that if you are interested. Okay, so just to recap, we learned what Linux is, as well as pros and cons. So what's going to happen next? Well, in the next video, we'll focus on certain decisions you need to make when installing Linux. So this includes Linux distributions. You may have heard of Ubuntu or something similar. This would also include desktop environments, which I reference in this video, as well as many other choices which may be important to you when installing. And in the video after that, we will give solid tips on actually installing as well as link you to important resources. So just to clarify, we are not going to be showing you how to install, but we will be linking you to resources on how to install it. But watch out for that, and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you're interested. And yeah.
So thanks for watching. This is the first video in the Linux series, so definitely make sure to subscribe so you never miss those videos again. And again, that was Rohit. In the next few videos you're going to see Max and Rohit. So welcome to the next generation of creative coding. That's all for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Creative Coding out.